Alrighty, hello everybody. So this is part one of our measures of variation notes. So to begin, you might be wondering, what is a measure of a variation? So measure of variation is a measure that describes the distribution of a data set. Okay, so one measure of variation that we're going to learn today is range. And I'm telling you right now that range is just like mean, just like median, just like mode, is incredibly easy to get because it just deals with one basic operation. So the range of a data set is the difference between the greatest value and the least value of a data set. So seeing the word here, difference, you already know that we're going to be dealing with subtraction. So you're basically just taking the greatest value of a data set and the least value of a data set, and you're just subtracting it. And that is literally it. That's all you're doing for range. Really, really easy to understand. So let's go through an example. Example A, the data shows the lengths of Burmese pythons, a type of snake. Find the range of their lengths. That's really random. Okay, so we have all of their lengths here. We have 18 and a half, 8, 11, 10, 14, 15 and a half, 12 and a half, and 5. So step one for finding the range of a data set, you just have to order the data from, you guessed it, least to greatest. Cannot stress that enough. Remember when you were working with median and I kept saying you need to order your data from least to greatest? The same thing here with range. If you do not order your data from least to greatest, you're going to have a very difficult time finding the correct range. You might find some kind of range, but it's not going to be correct. So please, first thing you have to do is order your data from least to greatest. Step two, you need to determine the least and greatest valued number in your data set. Okay, so let's take this data set and let's order it from least to greatest. So I already see here we have 5, and the next one is 8, and it looks like the next one is 10, then 11, then 12 and a half, or 12.5, but it's really 12 and a half, 14, then 15 and 5/10, or 15 and a half, and then looks like our last one is this guy right over here, 18 and a half. Okay, so we've ordered our numbers from least to greatest, so now we can easily see what's our least value number and our greatest value number, because the least value number will be on the left and the greatest value number will be on the right. So we know now that 5 is our least value number in our data set, and 18 and a half is our greatest. So now that we know that, we can find our range. So step 3, to find the range, you must subtract the greatest valued number from the least. Okay, so we know that our greatest value number in this data set is 18 and 5/10, and our least value number is 5. So all we have to do is subtract it. 18 and a half minus 5 is 13 and a half. And that is our range. That is all we have to do, is just take the greatest value number and subtract it from the least value number. Or we'll take the least value number and subtract it from the greatest value number. I apologize. So take your smallest number and subtract it from your biggest number. That is it. That is all you need to do to find the range of a data set. Okay, so now that we know how to find the range, before we move on to finding our interquartile range, we gotta go over some vocabulary that we've sort of went over already when we did box plots. So if you look at the bottom of your page of your notes, you'll see this little table here, and it has some words here that might look familiar or might not look familiar to you, depending on how much effort you put into paying attention to box plots. So for quartile, if you remember, it is the divided parts of a data set. I'm running out of room. Made it. Okay. So the divided parts of a data set. The first quartile, so this might not look familiar to you, but I know that lower quartile, you know, because that was in our notes last week. So lower quartile is the same thing as first quartile, and instead of just writing first quartile over and over again, you can just write Q1. Okay, and if you remember, that is the median of the lower half of our data set. Okay, and the third quartile is the upper quartile. Which is the median of the upper half. Okay, so our upper quartile, so first quartile means the same thing as lower quartile. Third quartile means the same thing as upper quartile. And again, third quartile, you don't have to keep writing the words third quartile, we can just write Q3. So just remember, first quartile is the same thing as saying, first quartile is the same thing as saying lower quartile. Third quartile is the same as saying upper quartile. So now that you know now that we've reviewed that, now we can go over interquartile range. So the interquartile range, or better known as, or when you put it in an acronym form, it's the IQR, which is the range of the middle half of data. Okay, so we're going to learn how to find the interquartile range, which is the range of the middle half of data. Okay, so now that we've worked through the first half of this video, I want you to move on to now you're ready to move on to part 2 of our measures of variation notes. So go ahead and move on to part 2.